You're listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio, featuring the Interactive Interview, courtesy of WrestlingEpicenter.com. Welcome back to Interactive Wrestling Radio. Joining us on the Newsmaker line right now is MLW's latest signee, a veteran performer who certainly deserves this opportunity. He is Rickey Shane Page. Are you with me, sir?
I am.
Such a pleasure to have you on the show. And, man, I introduced you as the latest signee to MLW. What does that mean to you after 22-plus years in this business?
Oh, I mean, it means everything, a lot, really. It's something I've been, working towards for 22 years, and for it to finally happen is just a big deal. It's just kind of a bit of a validation for me and what I've dedicated my life to. So it's pretty cool. I'm really excited.
Absolutely. And, that contract, it finally hits you, and it comes after a lot of people are pointing to the match you had with Mance Warner as the match where everybody said, yeah, this guy's got to be a full-timer with MLW. Do you feel that was probably the match that checked all the boxes?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. I was definitely in my element, and I've been in the ring with Mance before, so we have a bit of chemistry. So, yeah, I definitely think that was what kind of solidified it. And I just went hard, and when I didn't have to, after an insane travel schedule, the days leading up to that show was one of the most insane travel schedules I've ever had. So I think that kind of just solidified it for MLW management.
What was so crazy about it leading into that?
Well, 2 days before that, I was in Tokyo. So
oh crap!
Or
wow.
3 days. So I was in Japan for DDT. I wrestled. I got up the next morning, the next morning and that night I left to go. I flew from Haneda to Honolulu in Hawaii.
Uh-huh.
I was only supposed to have a 4-hour layover, but when I landed, there was a bit of weather in San Francisco, so I changed my flight to get a day in Hawaii because I had never been there.
Uh-huh.
I was in Honolulu for about 20 hours. The next morning, I woke up, flew to San Francisco. As soon as I got there, I went to sleep. I got up, wrestled that day for West Coast Pro Wrestling.
Wow.
I went back to the hotel, took a shower, took the red eye from San Francisco to Philadelphia. I landed in Philadelphia at maybe noon, day of that MLW taping. I went and took a nap for about an hour or two, and then I went to the show, and I had that match with Mance Warner.
That's insane. Most people would be, out for a week. I went to a concert last month and I was asleep like all weekend. So I don't. How do you manage to do that? That's incredible.
Yeah, I don't know. I was very tired, but I got the job done, and then the next day I went home and I slept for quite a while. But yeah, that was probably my most insane travel I've ever had to do. All
right, so you do things a little differently. Let's talk about your journey, and then we'll get to what I was just about to ask, and that is that this journey for you, like I said, started over 20 years ago, and you got into pro wrestling. I always am interested, what was the thing that you saw that made you think, you know what, I want to do this. I want to be a pro wrestler.
Mine is so silly. So I watched wrestling when I was quite young, early 90s, and then I kind of lost touch with it in the, around 93, 94, and I didn't watch it. And then when the Attitude Era started coming back up, again, I think a lot of people have this same thing. It's just, around the Attitude Era, everybody started watching wrestling again. And a friend of mine was getting the King of the Ring pay-per-view in 1998, which is the Hell in a Cell match between
Mick Foley
and Undertaker. And when Mick Foley was mid-air being thrown off of the cage, like just mid-flight, the thought of I want to be a wrestler popped into my head.
Wow.
So that was the day I decided, and then a few years later I started.
Very cool, very cool. And like I said, you do things a little differently. You are a hardcore guy. That is definitely a big part of what has made your career to this point. But that's not all you are. You obviously, maybe more so than some of the other hardcore guys, you have more roots in storytelling and psychology, and that goes not just in the matches, but also the things that surround the matches. How did you develop this unique approach where you get to encompass, dare I say, sports entertainment, pro wrestling, and hardcore wrestling all into one thing?
when I got back into wrestling around the Attitude Era, I really got into ECW, and I watched 95, 96, 97, like went back and watched everything from those years. And I feel that was like the perfect mix of storytelling and doing hardcore stuff and having good wrestling matches. So I feel a lot of that comes from there. So I was such a big fan of ECW, but yeah, I just feel like on the indies, a lot of people don't do it. And so if I just take a little bit of extra time to plan some stuff out, think about my matches differently, even, you know, the hardcore matches as well. And if I do that, I stand out because I'm not the most physically gifted professional wrestler out there. So I have to make for it up in other ways. But yeah, I've always just been a fan of that kind of wrestling. I'm very much a sports entertainment hardcore guy. And I just try to do that on the indies because I feel like a lot of people don't do that.
Exactly, I agree. And it's funny that you compared or that you talked about ECW because you and I were about the same age. I got a few years on you. I'm a little older than you. But we both grew up watching that stuff, that ECW stuff, and saw that. And that really was what transformed wrestling, especially on the indie level. But it also interjected itself into the mainstream as well. When you watch MLW, you can certainly see that Court was backstage at ECW for a while. You can certainly see that ECW has its influences on the MLW product. Is that what attracted you to MLW and their presentation of wrestling?
For sure. I mean, I remember when ECW closed down and MLW kind of, you know, filled in that spot back in 03, 04. And, you know, I used to watch MLW on the Sunshine Network.
Sunshine Network, right.
Yeah. A friend of mine got a satellite package and it was on there. So I remember watching that. And, you know, there was a lot of guys from ECW that were there, and then a good mix of what indie wrestling has turned into now with like Amazing Red and Christopher Daniels, Sanjay Dutt, like guys like that. So I was definitely a fan of MLW even before I even had a chance to work there. But definitely has that ECW vibe and feel where it's storytelling with good matches and a little bit of hardcore. So it's right up my alley. It really is.
Awesome. And you had some shots with another company fairly recently. You had some work with AEW. I've heard you reference the fact that you had a match with Paul White, the Big Show, as well as Matt Hardy and a bunch of other guys. I mean, you had a good number of matches. I think there were 6 or 7 of them. What was your thoughts on the experience backstage with AEW?
It's wonderful. Everybody treated me very well and with respect, and they really do treat the extra workers with respect, and I know a lot. I have so many friends there, so I was very lucky and fortunate to get put in good spots, to work with Matt Hardy and Paul White and Moxley, Kingston, Darby Allin. Like I really did have a lot of great matches there. I have nothing bad to say about it. It was wonderful. Everybody treated me very well, and Tony's very nice. He was always he spoke to me. A lot of times, if you go do extra work for WWE, you're not going to probably talk to Vince McMahon, but Tony was always open and there and talked and very nice. And I have nothing bad to say about AEW. It was definitely a good time.
Very cool. I've done my research. I've watched other interviews that you've done, and I heard you tell the story about when MJF called you up to ask for your take on a match that he was going to have. And at what point in your journey into wrestling did you realize that you've done it so long and that you've become so well respected by your peers that they're starting to ask you, hey, what do you think of what I'm doing here? Or maybe, what should I do here? At what point did you reach that point, and did that give you an extra boost of confidence to realize you had reached that plateau?
I don't know when it started. I feel like I've always been, there to try to give advice and things, and maybe too soon when I should have been given advice. But yeah, definitely, I'd say in the past 5-6 years, definitely a lot of people will come to me and ask questions, and just that from top to bottom. Even when I was at AEW, doing the extra work, some of my friends would come up and kind of talk to me about their matches and ask certain questions. And I don't know. I think I'm better at thinking of stuff for other people than I am for myself sometimes. And I really do enjoy that part of wrestling, of helping the younger people put their matches together and things like that. And that's definitely something I want to do in the future when I'm done being an in-ring talent. But yeah, I don't know. I just see things differently for other people, and people, MJF's a way better wrestler than I am, and so I can be like, oh, you should do this, and because he can actually do it. Because I would try to think of those things for myself, but I can't actually physically pull them off. So
at least you're honest about that. That's awesome. And MLW seems to have just a whole lot of guys backstage that have the same mindset, that they want to help everybody out. Joseph Samael was one of the ones that I had on a couple years ago leading into his man's match with Hammerstone, Jacob Fatu I'm speaking of. You guys just seem to have a great roster of guys just behind the scenes, a great support system that want to help everybody put on the best performance possible.
Yeah, it does. They got a really good crew, and everybody works together. There's no drama. Everybody gets along, and there's veterans there that want to help out the younger people, and there's eager younger wrestlers that are looking to learn and just get better. And that's what you need. You need that to be able to grow and build a brand, and I think MLW is in a really good spot to do that going forward.
Absolutely. The next question I have on my list says the wrestling landscape, and just looking at wrestling the way it is now, you have MLW getting their shot with Reels, you have AEW and WWE, you have Impact Wrestling, you have on the other side of things, the guys that are more on the Fight Network, that you've made your name on, really, GCW and CZW and those kind of companies. There is a lot of wrestling out there right now. What is your thoughts as a guy who's been there almost as long as me, watching wrestling, and seeing how many options there are for people to find wrestling these days?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, the internet has really helped wrestling come along. I mean, you can look at places like Beyond Wrestling. They pretty much grew their entire audience off of YouTube, and then now they're on IW TV, and just the fact that like IW TV and Fight Plus and streaming networks like that even exist is real crazy. And especially as a wrestler, it's wonderful because there's so many different places to work and to be able to get your name out there and stuff like that. I mean, it's good and bad. I mean, with everything, sometimes there's a bit too much wrestling, and it's kind of hard to grab people's attention, especially on the internet and stuff. So it's good and bad, but it's definitely good for the fans and good for the wrestlers in that sense. But sometimes it might be hard for companies to get a portion of that audience. But I mean, wrestling, I feel like this is the biggest boom that it's had since probably the Attitude Era, and it's just wild to watch. I'm just having fun watching it all, to be honest. Absolutely.
And this is kind of a rah-rah comment here, question for you about MLW. They got the TV deal with Reels. It's great. It's great to be able to see it on traditional television, on my basic cable here, watching it. How big is that in this day and age to still be considered one of the big dogs to have traditional TV?
I mean, it's amazing. It's when my dad, I can go, hey, you can watch my matches on YouTube. He doesn't really understand that. But if I go, hey, I'm on Reels right after Cops, my dad gets that. So that's awesome. That to me, that's being on television and traditional cable stuff is kind of the mark of that you're successful, to be honest. I mean, as wonderful as the internet is, I feel that it's a very small section of the fan base. Not everybody goes on Twitter. Not everybody has an Instagram. Not everybody's on Facebook, so it's, I think wrestlers get a bit blinded by the social media because they feel like that's the whole world, but it's really not. If you really look at the numbers, it's just a very small section of the world, and then you got to take that even further and make wrestling fans take that, it's even smaller, So being on traditional television is amazing, and it's not very many people get to do that, and not very many companies have done that. And Reels is a big channel, and they get into a lot of homes. So it's like, for me, it's just like that's the true mark of success.
All right. This is kind of an interesting question to wrap up with. It's, of course, about your signing with MLW. What are your goals? What is your hopes and aspirations to accomplish as a signed MLW talent?
Well, I put out a tweet, and these are the three goals that I had. Was 1, win a championship. Mm-hmm. 2, get an action figure. And 3, was for people. I said for people to I was going to prove everybody that slept on me wrong, but I will say this: my goal. I'm going to change that third one to. I feel like people sleep on MLW for whatever reason, and I'm going to do my best to get people not to do that. I'm going to try to get as many eyeballs on MLW as I can and as many asses in seats as I can. Those are my two goals. That's what I want, is for MLW to come up. And I feel like I'm in a good position to help that and build that brand and help the younger guys out. And just, I want MLW to grow.
All right. I said that was my last question. I'm going to tell you that I was lying. So one of your tag partners when you were with AEW for the stint there was VSK. And we've had VSK on, and we started talking about wrestling, and somehow we just ended up talking about our wrestling action figure collection. And I know that you just said you want to get your own figure. I know MLW is starting to produce figures. Are you a collector in that sense? And what does your collection look like?
I am not. At all.
You are not a collector. Wow.
I am not. I know, right? People ask me this all the time. I have a few old school ECW figures. Mm-hmm. That's about it. The reason I want an action figure is because I want to give it to my nephews and have them open it up for Christmas one day and be like, "Oh my God, this is Uncle Ricky. He's a toy." That's kind of the dream of mine for that. But yeah, I'm not a big collector. I'm not. Surprisingly enough, because I am into a lot of nerdy stuff.
All right, man. Well, before I let you go, do you mind if I ask for one last favor from you?
No worries.
You probably know what I'm going to ask. Do you mind if I get a station ID just saying this is Rickey Shane Page and you're listening to Wrestling Epicenter?
No problem. I can do that.
You want me to do the whole Wayne's World countdown?
I can. No, you're good. I'll just do it. Wrestling Epicenter? That's what it's called?
That's me. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Yo, this is Rickey Shane Page, and you are listening to Wrestling Epicenter.
All right, man. I thank you so much. That was a lot of fun. I tried to keep it short and sweet because I'm sure you're probably doing a few more of these. So thanks for taking the time to do this with me.
Yeah, no worries, man. Thank you for having me.
This is Interactive Wrestling Radio.
Interactive Wrestling Radio. Interactive Wrestling Radio. Interactive Wrestling Radio. Interactive Wrestling Radio. Interactive Wrestling Radio. Interactive Wrestling Radio. Oh, rush.
Featuring the interactive interview.
Interactive interview. Interactive interview. Interactive interview. Interactive interview. Interactive interview. Interactive interview. Oh, yeah.
Formerly The Blaze.
The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze. The Blaze rock.
You maniacs, so what you gonna do when the Blaze of Mania runs wild on you?
On WrestlingEpicenter.com.
Wrestling Epicenter.
Wrestling
Epicenter. Wrestling
Epicenter.
Wrestling Epicenter.
Wrestling Epicenter. The Wrestling Epicenter. Don't get off.
And now we shamelessly name drop from our history.
The Wrestling Epicenter would like to apologize for the following.
All right, everybody. Viva la raza. Viva la raza.
Hey, y'all.
Hello, ladies.
Hey guys, we had a lovely conversation.
First lady.
Absolutely. Oh, look at me. He's so kooky.
Be there. Where else?
Interactive
Wrestling Radio.
Wrestling.
Epicenter.
Oh my God, you win! Wow, being interactive.
Whoa! I just got some listen. I was not shooting. Yeah, I almost pissed my pants. Breaking neck. I got 2 words for you. I've heard a lot about you guys. Look here, let's go. Excuse my language. You're gonna go to the shop. You know, into the many.
No nerves.
That was great. It's gonna be cool. Woo! What it's all about. The purest point of the living legend. Rock and roll. Arrogant.
You're listening to me.
Instead of statement, I'm talking to you. Charisma.
So lonely without you.
Yeah.
In the land of extreme.
Testify. Nevermore. Interactive. Interview. I'm not just the best. Interactive. Interview with a plastic
You
head.
earned the right.
Nobody. You better keep listening. Thank you very much. Controversy creates cash. Professional
Made
wrestling.
in the USA, baby.
Memphis wrestling. The guy on fire. I'm not going to talk to you, dummies.
We were sexy.
What a show.
One and only.
Interactive Wrestling Radio.
Wrestling Epicenter.
Interactive interview. We took care of the business. This isn't ballet. We are huge. You're where it's at. You better recognize who's the best. Make sure to tune in each and every week. I'll come out of your computer, knock down your door, and turn it on for you. Or else I'm going to kick your stinking teeth in. And that's the bottom line.
Have a nice day.
It's showtime!
Don't forget to like and subscribe.